The topic we are to go through tonight is feeling the divine providence. Feeling is more than thinking. It goes beyond words. So it's going to be a different moment for us. I am learning this topic. I rarely like to talk about topics that I don't know or that I don't feel. But this one is special. And it's very invitational because it doesn't bring any guilt. When we talk, for example, about forgiveness, I would recommend to people, only talk about it if you really do it. If you don't talk about it. This one is about feeling. It's something that is between, as Mother Teresa said, between us and God. There is nothing, nobody in between. And it's an everlasting learning experience. Today, we may feel God's providence in some way. Tomorrow, as we grow more mature, we're going to feel it with a different perspective, and there's nothing wrong. Animals, children, teenagers, adults, elderly ones, each one feels God in a different way. When we talk about God, the understanding brings so many words, but words are just words. But Spiritism brings them to us so we can raise awareness. In the book Genesis chapter 2, we have a beautiful summary about everything that encompasses the Spiritist view on God. If you want to read a summary of it all, it's in chapter 2 of this book. And it's so beautiful. Because Kardec is not only convincing, but he inspires us. Question: why do we want to feel God's providence? Why? Why do I care? Oh, really? Why? Is it important? It is. Does it make any change in my life? Hopefully. When I talk about divine providence, Kardec is unsurpassing. I've read many masters, from the teachings of Buddha in that regard to the Tao of Lao Tse, and even reading parts of the Quran and the Torah in that regard. Even what we find in the Bible is unsurpassing. Because Kardec gets the veil out and says, this is your Creator who loves you. Face it and embrace it. There is no mysticism anymore. There is no separation anymore. Kardec brings us closer to God than anyone or any force has brought to us. Bringing Jesus, of course, he quotes Jesus. So he comes, brings Jesus at another light. Because we are going to see that if God's nature encompasses all of this, a supreme intelligence, as Kardec says, God is more intelligent than any one of us together. So if I have a problem, who should I present my problem to? The one who knows more, God. There is nothing and nobody on the universe that knows more about anything than God. Eternal, meaning it has no beginning, has no end. You and I, we're not eternal. We are immortal. We have a beginning. We have no end. Even if I desire to die, the news is that it's not going to happen. Because the body dies, we keep on living. So that escape mechanism is not going to work. And God is going to be there, everywhere. Immutable. God does not change. Oh, I think now this is happening to be because God changed his mind. Now God is allowing me. Isn't that what people say? Now I got my house. I bought a home. I think now God changed his mind in regard to me and thinks I'm deserving of a house. God doesn't change his mind. His mind is immutable. We may have changed, but God doesn't. Immaterial. If this body dies, God doesn't die. So this idea of us returning to the source doesn't exist. Because we don't return to the source because we were created by God as the source, but he doesn't need us to return to him. Not physically, because he's immaterial. So that idea is just a misconception. All powerful. No matter how much evil tempts us, no matter how much evil beings may be harassing us and putting us down, God is more powerful. And his goodness. Because his goodness is supreme. There is no justice, no goodness that is supreme, more supreme than God's. No wonder when we read this book 50 years later, we're going to see a character there, Celia. In the eyes of men, she was suffering. People were looking at her, man, I can't believe she's suffering that much. Oh, poor Celia. But in the eyes of God, what happened after she died? Everybody else who thought she was poor Celia, they were here, and she was above, spiritually speaking. Because in the eyes of God, there is no injustice. There is just learning experiences. If right now we are seated here, and I tell you, at this very moment, very moment, there is a scientist who is working in a project, and he's not going to go to sleep until he finds out the solution to his problem. We may feel, oh, can't believe it, that's not fair. He could go home, enjoy his family, have a meal, rest. But he's only taking that charge because he can. Because he has the qualifications. Because he is at a level that he can endure that hardship. Something that probably I couldn't. So God only gives difficult tasks and difficult assignments to those who can endure. So if I look back at Chico Xavier's life, how many people came to him and said, Chico, you're not married. I'm married. A friend of his did that to him. He dared to stop by at a line, people getting autograph. He stopped and he dared to look at Chico Xavier's eyes and say, Chico, I'm sorry for you. You don't have a wife. I do. You don't have children. I do. What job you have? I have a company. I'm very successful. And you? You work for the government? You're a public servant? And you're always sick. I'm healthy and wealthy. I'm sorry. If this what you're doing is great, I don't get it, because your life is miserable. And here we are, thanks to Chico Xavier. Probably we were not there like that man daring to be so cruel to Chico Xavier. But maybe that's how we think sometimes. That the people who are happy and lucky, we say, are those who have this pattern. They constitute a family, they have kids, they have the greatest cars, they have the greatest jobs, and they are healthy, etc. Majority of people think like this. How can we understand that in the eyes of a supreme and just God? Just and good God. That view is wrong. That's exactly what Jesus came to teach us. He came and said, our Father is supremely just and good, but you don't need any of these things to deserve the kingdom of God. Because the kingdom of God is in your heart. It's not in your family. It's not in your job. It's not in your health. It's not anywhere external. It's internal. So Spiritism brings that teaching of Jesus at another level and starts saying, a God that is unique, because there is only one. We pray, Dr. Bezerra de Menezes, can you help us, please? But Dr. Bezerra is not God. And if we don't receive the help, we cannot blame him like we used to do at this time 2,000 years ago, when people believed in many gods, and they used to say, oh, maybe this is happening because Jupiter is upset with me. There is no God. Dr. Bezerra would not be upset with us, and he is not all-powerful to decide what we need. There's only one God. Even if we pray to Dr. Bezerra de Menezes, or to Chico Xavier, or to Joana de Angelis, which is fine, in the aftermath of all the prayers, it is going to be God that is going to reply to us. And God is infinitely perfect. So there is no such thing as, oh, God is upset with me now because now I committed a crime. Good news. God loves us today as much as he loved us yesterday, as much as he will love us tomorrow. But we can claim, no, Vanessa, it doesn't make sense, because yesterday I was a worse person than today. Tomorrow I'll be better. He must love me more tomorrow. God doesn't change. You remember? Immutable. He doesn't change. He loves without condition. He's not saying to us, hey, I will love you more if you pray more. No. He loves you with or without prayer. He loves the criminals. He loves the animals. And he loves the animals as much as he loves us. Oh no, but they are animals. We're humans. But they are creatures of God. And there's another thing. God created matter. In the Genesis, we get to know, as much as in the Spirit's book, that when God created the universe, he created two elements, spirit and matter. Matter is creature. So God provides to all, irrespective. It's mind-blowing, the concept, because it changes everything. No matter if we want to crucify somebody whom we met and made a big mistake, God's not going to change his love for this person. But this person hurt my family. Okay. But God loves this person anyways. Then I don't love God. Okay, He's going to continue loving you. No problem. No, but I'm going to hate him. I'm going to create a strike against him. Okay, He's going to continue loving you. No problem. God doesn't change. And it's not boring. Because when you look at His creation, He is very vivid in His creation. He is very original. By the way, He's the only one that has originality. We're simply co-creators. We'll never be original. And we should tell this to our children. Hey, don't strive for originality, because there is only one in the universe that is original, God. We are co-creators. Even I, as a scientist, if tomorrow I find out a new discovery, it's not mine. Even if they name after me, Anceloni, a new virus, Anceloni. It's not mine. Because I didn't create it. I just unveiled it. But it was always there. God created it. The day we reach that level of awareness, we will be humble. Humble with firmness. As says Brother X when he talks about Jesus. Jesus, if He were this person we portray, talking very mildly and kindly and showing this twisted humility that we have in mind, nobody would have crucified Him. They would look at Him and say, forget about Him. He's not going to bother anybody. Jesus was not like that. He was humble, but He was firm. He was determined, and He bothered people. So we really need to read all those books back again and again to revisit what is it that we're striving, so we don't feel that guilty by being firm and determined. And at the same time, kind and humble. When Brother X tells us about that passage of Jesus being noble and modest at the same time, it's puzzling to us on the earth. An elegant Jesus he was talking about. And it's funny, and I shared this with you. Yesterday, we were giving a Spiritist conversation in an Essene church in Bethesda. And it's so fascinating. I was sharing with them that idea that Brother X passed to us about an elegant Jesus. And elegance is something that bothers people. Because it's too perfect. Elegance is a representation of this divine perfection. And at the end, a couple who came from Southern Virginia, and we were in Bethesda. They were there the very day. They make candles, like, what is that? Statues of candles. And they had one that they said, you know how we named this one? Elegant Jesus. You see how universal it is what Brother X brings to us. That idea that Jesus is not that curved person who is walked and afraid of people and talks so slowly and says, oh, my dear brother. No, if he were like this, nobody would bother with him. He was a man that would come and hug and say no. That wasn't he the guy who said, you must learn how to say yes, yes, no, no. And people are like, man, this guy's too much. Crucify him. Because he is beyond measures. Because he is divine sent. He is telling us that God is the one that when we allow him to come through, the design is perfect. So much so that tonight, the spirit mentors would like us to understand God's providence, God is so intelligent, so caring, that He really cares for all His creatures. If we take a look at this picture here, we are in 2012, when America was discovered. It probably looked like this. And it's rare a place, thank you, Daniel, you find on the earth today, I mean, at least in America, that looks like this. And here there were some people, the indigenous tribes, and some Europeans coming along. When we study history in this book, On the Way to the Light, we're gonna tell how God kindly, through His messengers, were caring for all the ones. He didn't put indigenous people here for them to live the rest of eternity like indigenous people. Thank you, Daniel. And this is something interesting, because some people, when they get to know of some qualities of indigenous tribes, they think, oh, the white man destroyed their innocence. No. We're not talking about cruelty that happened. We're talking about the necessity of progress. We needed that encounter for both to progress. And in this book, On the Way to the Light, Emmanuel explains to us the divine providence through the divine messengers, bringing those men to meet the new grounds, the new people, and create a new civilization for the benefit of both. Because only materialistic people would feel the sorrows of those hardships. Because when we grow more spiritual, we understand that those indigenous peoples then reincarnated in the very families of the Europeans who came to this land. Law of cause and effect. There's no injustice. Because God is the just. And He cares for those who were here, for those who are coming in. And Kardec says, God is everywhere. Feel this. Feel it. God is everywhere, meaning now, here, He sees everything and presides over everything. Whoa. Does that mean if I want to commit a crime now, He knows, He sees what I'm about to do? Yes or no? Really? And He doesn't do anything? How come? How come? And then we come and say, oh, on September 11, God went silent. Really? And the rest of the days when we commit crimes, is He silent every second? Because there is a crime everywhere on this earth at every millisecond. Somewhere on the earth. So is He always silent? Or is He only silent when it pertains to us? When crime hits us hard. What about when we do harm somebody else? Where is He? Spiritism is telling that God is everywhere. Sees everything. Oh, but I don't want, and then I speak very quietly, like in the ears of my friend, don't tell anybody. I don't want God to hear this. Okay, good news. God is, because He doesn't need ears or air for sound to come to His mind and know. But then you may be asking, same question as Kardec asked, how is it possible that God is everywhere? What is this? He says He sees everything and He's everywhere and takes care of even the smallest things. Does that mean that He knows my Social Security number before I get it? Yes. Mm-hmm. In fact, according to this understanding, God already sees us perfect. Because for God, there is no time. He loves us. He doesn't see us as we see ourselves. When He sees us, He's already seeing us perfect. How? We don't know, because we're not God. But that's how it is. So what happens when we, God knowing something, and it doesn't go aligned? He allows us to do it. How does it happen? Because He created us with free will. We have freedom to choose. He respects it. But much like a child, when we put a child in a crib, the child can move a little bit. For the child, the baby, oh, I'm free, I can move here and there. But then there is boundary. If I try to pass the boundary, I get hurt. The mom didn't come there to the baby and say, bad baby. No. The circumstance in itself is already set up in a way that if we pass that boundary, we're going to hurt ourselves. So if I get hurt, I created that. God didn't. And not necessarily we'll feel it right away. We may feel it reincarnations from now. What we are sowing today, maybe we're going to reap in 10 reincarnations from now. And I'll say something that Haroldo said in Chicago in his meeting. He said, we cannot disturb the divine design. We cannot disturb. We pay a high price. Especially when we block the pathway of the messengers of God on the earth. We will pay a high price, and if not today, it's going to be reincarnations to come. Why? Because God punishes us? We pass the boundary. The fall is on us. It's not on God. Because He created us surrounded by love, and it's on us. You want comfort and care? Here it is. If you pass this, you're going to fall. It's on you. Of course, I'll find somebody to bring you back. But then the hurt, the wounds, it's on you. He's going to find people to help us. But it's going to be just like that. It's amazing what Kardec describes. He says that the whole nature is immersed in the divine fluid. From the animals who are under seas to the animals who are jumping on the branches of the trees, they are all immersed in the divine fluid. All of them, like us. We are immersed in this divine fluid that cares for us. And we are constantly in the presence of the divinity. It's sad when we think that God is only in the Spiritist Center or in the church or in the temple, in the synagogue. Because at home, when we are watching TV, when we are browsing the internet, sending an email, Facebooking people, texting, even in the bathroom. At Kardec's time, there was no bathroom. But I'm 100% sure when he said we're constantly in the presence of God, he wouldn't discard today the bathroom. And I say this on purpose because we think it's such an intimate moment. We're there taking a shower, brushing our teeth. Oh no, God, come on, God, give me a break. At least here, it's my moment. But without God, I wouldn't be even moving my hands or using my arms to move around, to wash my body. So God is everywhere. And I'll say this because Spiritism is clear-cut. In the most intimate moments of our lives, God is there. You know what I mean? And that's what I mean. God is there. Why wouldn't God be there? There is no moment where God is not. There is no place where God is not. These are Kardec's words. Constantly in the presence of the divinity. That's why Andre Luis comes to us and says, in O Solar, he says, oh, I found out that when I was on the spiritual plane, there were spirits surrounding me, telling me, suicide, you're suicidal, you're suicidal. And he was like, I didn't get that. What is that all about? Oh, don't you remember when you were social drinking? Pause. What is social drinking to do with the story of the baby falling from the crib? Where is the boundary there that I'm passing? The boundary is God gave me a perfect body, and then I'm drinking. Drinking does not add to health. It takes health away. It dehydrates the cells of the body. But Vanessa, only a glass, 2 glasses, 3 glasses. Sincerely, you don't need a glass to dehydrate a cell. Go to the laboratory, take a tissue with cells, put just for a few seconds, immerse it in alcohol, and it doesn't need to be 100% alcohol. 70% alcohol, 50% alcohol. It's enough to start dehydrating the cell. If God gives us life and we take that life away, I am not allowing the care of God to take care of me. It's as if I'm saying, God, come on, give me a break. I don't need you. When I am selfish and proud, the same that the Spirit say, the worst vices are selfishness and pride. Selfishness, and people thought Jesus were selfish and proud. Believe it. Because they were seeing Jesus what they had inside of them. We may have Chico Xavier in front of us and not recognize. Like the man in Belo Horizonte in the bookstore. He saw Chico Xavier, he couldn't believe. He said, I wish you were Chico Xavier. He turned his back. And Chico Xavier said, yeah, I wish I were Chico Xavier too. But he couldn't recognize the greatness of the man in that humility because he was only seeing himself. And sometimes we're so used to passing the whole day seeing ourselves in the mirror, especially our teenagers. We need to tell our teenagers, don't be too much into your vanity. I remember Godinho here in this podium this year, when we invited him, he said something that probably we didn't pay attention. Don't teach vanity to your kids. And that's what we do. Because they are accustomed so much to thinking of themselves alone that when they see others, they don't see anybody but themselves. And then we grow adults that are egocentric. Because we don't change overnight. And you don't want your child to suffer because you taught them egocentrism. Because you teach them vanity. And then you cry as they cry. Because we're not allowing them to be aware of this constant divine presence. Kardec adds, our thought is in constant contact with God's thought. Cannot hide anything. But that's a plus. Because as Kardec says, if I'm desperate, I don't need to call a God, please come and scream, hoping that God is going, he says, Kardec says in the Genesis, hoping that God is going to climb down from the highest mountains to come to our rescue. No, God's not like there or hidden somewhere. God is here. So all we need to do is introspect. God, it's hard now. That's all he needs. That's a prayer. Because in the Gospel according to Spiritism, which is sold out, right? Which is good, sold out. But in that chapter about prayer, it tells us that prayer is thought transmission. So a thought is our link with God. And I don't need to pray a lot. And I don't need to scream or chant. I remember years ago, somebody from California calling us and saying, Vanessa, I found out how people are going to become spiritists in this country. I said, how? Sing during the spiritist talks. I said, that's not for me. Maybe for Steve, for us, but not for me. I mean, really? No, because if people sing, they feel the connection. Of course, as a scientist, then I got what he meant. If we put people in that trance, then we're going to feel like it's hypnotic. But Spiritism said, it's done. We're done with that era of putting people in trance to create followers. We don't need followers. We don't need gurus. We don't need spiritual leaders. We need God. And God does not need us to chant. There is no formula. If you chant and you feel the connection, keep it. But one day you feel that a thought is all you need to connect with God. I don't need a specific object to feel, no, now I'm protected. How many things do we have sincerely in our bag right now? I keep it for protection. Really? Really? That little thing in your purse is protecting you in this universe? I don't think so. Spiritism is saying, come on, people. God is above and beyond any object. There is no object we need to protect us. There is only God. Only. And Kardec, to explain, and I brought the text, he created an image for us to understand how we're connected to God at that level. He said, let us imagine a fluid, meaning like an energy, subtle enough to penetrate all objects. Well, let us imagine that this fluid is intelligent, has perception, sensitivity, and it no longer acts blindly, but with discernment, will, and freedom. It sees, understands, and feels. That's how it is, the connection between God and us. It's inside, it's connected, as we think it feels. And he gives two more examples, and I'll just bring one of them. For example, my finger here, if I pinch the tip of my finger, okay, my finger doesn't have a brain, but I know what's happening here. Why? Because it's connected by the nerves to the brain. And the brain of the physical body to the spiritual body to me, spirit. I, Spirit Vanessa, know that I am pinching my finger of my left hand. I am spirit, connected to this body. Whatever happens to the body, I know. If something happens to the toe, I know. If something happens to my right arm, I know. If something happens to the farthest distances of my body, I know. As much as anywhere else. By bringing that analogy, Kardec is bringing to us the awareness on how God and us, we are connected. No matter the finger, oh, but it's so tiny. Come on, of course, if something happens to your heart, you know. It doesn't matter. The heart, the finger, the toe, the arm, the leg, the knee. I know. Equally. And I care about all. And it hurts probably the same. Somebody comes here and say, oh, but you don't know what it is. You don't know. When I hurt my nail, somebody's going to say, well, you don't know what it is when I hurt my head. Well, a hurt is a hurt. And perception of pain is perception of pain. So God will know what happens to you as much as He knows what happens to me, and everybody the same. So at this very moment, He's taking care of all of us and all the invisible organisms that are here. How do we know? The book Evolution in Two Worlds. It's the most amazing thing to know that God cares so much for the amoeba that He provides divine architects to plan the progress of the amoeba. And then we're like, what? The amoeba? They need that type of babysitter? Yes. They are as important as we human beings are. In that book, we have a lesson of eco-friendliness. Equal and the same in this planet. It's so advanced, the thought of the spirits, that it takes some time for us to really grasp that greatness of God. And he says, God reads the deepest folds of our mind. Don't hide it, because He reads it. Sincerely, as Joana de Angelis says, I don't know when death is going to call us. Can be today. Can be tomorrow. Can be in 50 years, 100 years, I don't know. But one thing I know, if I want to be at peace at the moment of death, I purposely put the sunflowers because of our friend Selenia. As in much peace as she was, I need to prepare myself. How? God already knows everything. The problem is, are we up to date? We need to sit down, get the files, and say, oh man, that wasn't good. I have to reconcile that file before that day comes along. Because God, at death, is not going to punish us. But if our file does not match His, the way it's supposed to be, we will suffer of shame, of guilt, of sorrow, of anguish. So we need to bring that current. And it's on each one of us to really do that. And God is constantly at our side. Wow. So fear disappears. When Kardec wrote that sentence, he destroyed fear. Done. Because if God is all powerful and He is constantly at our side, there is no better Superman than God. And He's not a man. There is no better superhero than God. Because there is no place where I will be and I'll be afraid. Some people say, but Vanessa, Divaldo Franco is 85 and he's traveling to all these remote places on the earth. What if this happens and that happens and the other happens? He knows of this. God is constantly at our side. Is He going to abandon Divaldo somewhere in a remote location of the earth? Why? Is God more in the Americas than in Asia? If I go today to Japan, is God less in Japan than in the United States? If today I go to West Baltimore, complicated. It's dangerous. But is God less there than here on the north? Is God more in Brazil than in the US? Oh, but the sun shines more strongly there. Really? But God is everywhere and constantly at our side. Even the side of the worst criminals. No wonder Divaldo had experiences that were transformative to criminals. Because when he faced them, by knowing this concept, he could more easily touch the hearts of criminals. Two guys were coming along and then one stayed, the other one left. And they wanted to, go to Divaldo's home and steal his stuff, etc. In that conversation, by keeping himself faithful, by knowing that God is constantly at our side, both his and the criminal, he opened an opportunity for higher spirits to come and present themselves and make that man have a change of heart at that very moment. The next day, he found the man a job, etc. Well, we're not saying that Divaldo is the all-powerful. We're saying that God is the all-powerful, and Divaldo allowed the all-powerful to play his role in that man's heart that very likely was just a step away from transformation. Because Jesus said, you got healed because of your faith. So I'm not claiming that Divaldo is the miracle maker, but we're saying he was the medium. What about us? If God is constantly at our side, right now, when we leave these doors, at our homes, everywhere, there is no place where God is not. How can I ever feel anything else but greatness? And if I cry this day, tomorrow I bounce back and say, if I have God, the Psalm, right? The Psalm in the Old Testament. If I have God, what do I have to fear? The Lord is my shepherd. What does that concept of shepherd means? He cares. He cares. Tonight, we are feeling that we are cared for. Even if you didn't ask for, you are. I am. We are. Our thoughts resound within God, and that's good or bad. If my thoughts are good, great, because they match. If not, I go against. I suffer. My thoughts will collide with God's thoughts if I'm not on the same page with God. I suffer. That's why selfishness and pride have no room. Because if God provides to all, who are we to only wish things for ourselves? Who are we to think that we are more than anybody else if God Himself is providing to all irrespectively? Potential, capacities, capabilities, equally to all. And a spirit came in the Parisian Spiritist Society at Kardec's time in 1867, the spirit named Quinaman, and he gave a beautiful communication in regards to God's providence. He says, if a limb of my body moves, I as a spirit sense it. If I think, God knows about it. When Kardec asked in the Spirit's book, Law of Freedom, when are we ever free? And the Spirit said, well, the only place where you have absolute freedom is in your thought. But God knows. We are free, but God knows. He doesn't punish, but He knows. Like a father. I know you're being mischievous. I know. So God knows. Everything. And that's great. We don't want to be alone even in our mistakes. We don't. It's wonderful to know that even when we are wrong, God knows. Why? Because He's going to care. He's going to say, my daughter, my son, I'm here to bring you back to track. Thank God He knows everything. Because we're not going to fall in an endless abyss of wrongdoings. He's going to be there to our rescue way before we even think about going back to track. Because oftentimes we make mistakes without knowing we're making a mistake. Often, as in the book Good News, Boa Nova, by Brother X, he says, a passage by Jesus, when he turns to Peter and says, Peter, when he talks about Judas, he says, Peter, we often make a mistake because we're fragile. It's more about fragility than evil. It's more about ignorance than evil. No wonder at the cross he said, Father, forgive, for they don't know what they are doing. Because if we knew, we would keep the Master here to date, alive, in the flesh, saying, Master, please, keep boosting your physical body for eternity, because it's so good to be with you. But our ignorance pushed away the divine love. And we do it every day, in some way and fashion. Pushing away the greatest things of our lives. And we don't talk about people and things. We talk about ourselves. The best in us that we have. Because it is good when we are humble. And then we are tempted to pride. Like Chico. He could have been very proud of himself. And the man of the bookstore, when he came and said, I wish you were Chico, he could have disputed and said, hey, but don't you see I'm Chico? Here's my ID. Come on. But he took the best route. He kept himself quiet and say a word, say, fine. It's hard to be like this. But when we take that step, it feels so much easier. Because we're calm, we're tranquil inside of us. So knowing that when we think God knows of it, we're cared for the shepherd. What about turbulent days? We're going to wrap up by reading this passage in a book that is not in English. It's named Rumo Certo, Right Path or something, Right Route. Chapter 3, when Emmanuel talks about the blessings of God in the most difficult times of our lives. That's when we feel the providence of God. He says, in all the trials that appear in your days, consider the quote of blessings that surround you. Lean on faith and patience, and you will recognize the divine providence acting with you, through you, sustaining you in the problems that mark your path to give you solution to them. Because the divine providence is with us in good and in bad days. And in bad days, God is not silent. God is closer than we imagine. We are deaf, not listening to God. When people say, where was God on 9/11? Where was God on Hiroshima? Where was God when Sandy passed as a storm? He was not quiet. We were blind or deaf and could not get him. So Emmanuel says, open up and consider the quote of blessings. Lean on faith, patience, and you will recognize the divine providence acting with you, through you, sustaining the problems and bringing the solutions. Because He is the all-powerful, the knowledge, the mercy, the justice, the goodness of the universe. We're going to stop here to feel God in preparation for the passes, to meditate a little more in these blessings of the divine providence.